Welcome to Tail Learn Code. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
I have the lovely Francesca Socolick. Is that I'm saying it right?
Sure. No. Socolick. It's a doozy. So no foul points for you.
So Socolick, is that how you said it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah.
Socolick. Okay. I'm horrible at pronunciation, but I try my best. And I always try to correct myself. Which is it's fun when you work in the IT industry because there's a lot of fun names to pronounce. Especially the longer you work in the IT industry. So welcome so much. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. As I was telling you right before, I've heard, this is the first time I've met you, but I've heard great things from some of your coworkers. So I'm really excited to talk to you, for the next hour or so. So let's just start off with, tell us about yourself, who you are, and what you do and such.
So my name is Francesca, and I work for Toro here in Louisville, the tech company, not the Mexican restaurant. And I am their director of product and user experience. I actually just hit my 1-year anniversary.
Awesome.
About 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So what does it mean to be the director? I mean, what does that actually mean?
Oh man, I'm still figuring that out. So it's a new role for the company. Actually, UX in general was a new role. So when I got brought on, I was their first official user experience hire. And that meant a lot of things. That was helping to define, what products should look like, what they should feel like from the customer's perspective, from the business perspective, and just bringing an overall process to the product development lifecycle, everything from prototyping to usability testing. These are some new processes or processes that weren't used consistently, across the board that I was bringing to the group. And on the flip side of that, also learning a ton. So I would say this is probably my first experience being involved with what I would consider more of a dev shop. So we have somewhere between 60 to 70 developers. And previously in other organizations that I worked at, maybe our largest group was like 6 or 7 developers because we were either supporting a software as a service implementation, or we had some teams that were outsourced and they were really to support the devs. So me coming from more the business perspective, I wouldn't really be involved with them at all. So overall, it's been a neat experience because I brought something to teach and to learn to everyone else. But in turn, I've also learned a lot.
No, sure enough. So the other day we were interviewing Richard Teachout, who's the CTO there. And so we got to learn a little bit about I've known Toro for years, but I mean, we as a community get to learn a little bit more about what Toro does. So I'm guessing you're working on the portals or type things that your customers are using?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean that's it's funny because portals a lot of times get kind of the least attention as to how they look. Although sometimes that's really to a detriment. So it's great to hear that you guys are actually spending the time to build them correctly and make them usable. But that's really great to hear. So so now the other interesting part. I mean, actually, well. It's interesting. I was looking you up this morning, and I found a lot of interesting things about you. But so you're actually from New York City. Although as we were talking right before, we don't hear much of that accent, which is I really was shocked.
Well, I think it comes from a couple different reasons. So one is that I have been living here for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
And then the second reason is that when I was first starting out my career, my very first job was at a scientific publishing house in Tribeca in Manhattan, which is kind of this poshy, hoity-toity area of the city, right? Like Tribeca Film Festival and all that stuff. And I, had just graduated college and I was working as an HR assistant. So I had 4 or 5, managers that I supported. And a lot of people would comment on my accent and equate me to that movie from the 80s, Working Girl, where like the lead actress, I can't remember her name, but like she would take the ferry every morning, and that's exactly what I did. And I had a lot of people comment on how strong my accent was. And I think because of that, kind of subconsciously, I've dulled it out a lot. So where people think I'm from Chicago or like some Midwest thing, but then when I tell them, like, no, my parents are from Brooklyn, I grew up in Staten Island, yeah, a lot of people don't believe it.
Huh. Yeah, I was gonna say, you sound more like if you've moved around a lot than grew up and raised in one area, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't have much of an accent. That's because I moved a lot of places as a child and even growing up, or even as an adult. But so you've been in Louisville for a little bit over 2 years. I mean, what do you think about Louisville? You enjoyed it, or can't wait to get back to New York, or?
No, well, couple things. I love the foodie atmosphere. Like that's a huge plus. And I would even say like way better food choices than in New York, and also way more affordable too, because New York's pretty expensive.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's no comparison there.
Yeah.
You know, I remember growing up, and I lived in the Cherokee Park area, which for those outside of Louisville, that's kind of a nicer area of Louisville. And right across the street was pretty much what I consider to be a mansion. All right, and this couple from New York City moved into it. They had no furniture or anything in it, but to them, they were just astonished. They were able to get this house. I mean, this is back in the late '80s, and I think they paid. You know, I think they were like, "Oh, we only paid $250,000 for this house," and I couldn't get our apartment for that kind of price. You know, and of course that's 40 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely something Louisville's got. Is cost is not so bad, although not as great as everyone wants to. I hear that all the time. It says, "Oh well, Louisville, we don't need to pay as much because the cost of living isn't that high." I'm like, yeah, well, it's high enough that I need more money than that. But no, cool. So why did you move to Louisville?
Yeah, so I actually moved here for my husband. So my husband is also from Staten Island, and he was going through a change of career pathway in his life. So he worked as a banker, selling mortgages and life insurance. He did that for about 8 years. And then he realized that he just didn't really want to do that anymore. And he always had an interest in technology and development and coding. And that's when I met him. So I met him in this like weird transitional phase where he basically didn't have a job. He wasn't really working. But he told me what his goal and his intention was. And at that point I had been working already in IT for several years. And he had wanted to go back to college to earn a bachelor's degree in computer science so that he could become a developer. And I was like, well, you really don't need to do that. Like there are these acceleration boot camps kind of programs you can go through because you already have a college degree. So you don't need to completely start from scratch. So he went through that process. We found a program up in the Northeast out of Rutgers University, which is in New Jersey. It was a 6-month boot camp, very similar to Code Louisville, but a little bit more fast track, I think. And then he graduated from there, and we were looking for jobs in the tri-state area. And he was getting a lot of feedback like, oh, I love your banking background. You could totally work in fintech, but come back after your first job. So we were getting a lot of that, which is very like this defeating catch-22 kind of feeling that I know a lot of people go through when you're trying to start any career, whether it's your first, your second, or your third. Just that first step is really important. And I have a friend that lives down here that I met a long time ago, and for years she's been bugging me to move down to Louisville. And I'm like, what am I gonna do in Louisville? Like, why would I move down there? What am I going to do? And she's like, well, I heard of this new company called Toro. They're really up and coming. So long story short, the reason why we moved here is so that my husband can work at Toro, which he still does. He's a developer. And then I kept my job in New York. So I would work from home and maybe about once a month go back to my job in New York. And then once that project ended, I started looking for opportunities in town. And then I met Rich, and then here I am.
Awesome. Yeah. And sure enough, and we were talking about this with Rich. I mean, El Toro is definitely better for the people who are just getting started, right? Because they're willing to take those chances. That's a problem we have in this industry is the entry level. They want like a year experience. I'm like, that's not entry level then, right? They want junior developers to have 3 or 5 years experience. I've been complaining about this for like the last 10 years. It's a hiring manager. I'm like, well, this makes no sense. Why does my junior developer need to have 3 or 5 years experience? I want someone who's out of school. I don't, I'm not looking for,
Right.
but it's great that he got with El Toro, because like I said, El Toro's, again, not just like last week, not to turn this into a big ad for El Toro, but El Toro does, I really like what they've done with how they hire folks, and
Absolutely.
how they're not focused on the multiple years experience. Rich said it really well the other day of, looking for more of that experience in life than experience in professional. So that's cool. Because again, like I said, I had not met you before, so I didn't know what your story was. I didn't know how you moved. I knew you came down from New York City. I didn't know why. That's actually a really interesting story, the way how that worked out. But I have to ask, how do you like working in the same company as your husband does?
So we don't really talk about being married, although now it's being broadcasted to a whole 9 people. So Socolick is actually my maiden name, so right. I chose purposely to keep that for work, at least while I'm still in Louisville, given that we're in the same industry. But yeah, our work overlaps a little bit, so we're not on the same team. Right. But given that I'm in UX and he's a developer, I kind of think of what he should do or build and then work with him to create that. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting that we could just have those sort of interactions in the workplace. Right.
Well, I love that I valued your all's marriage. No, I asked that question because I love my wife dearly, but I would never want to work with her. Right? I need that break right during the day of have my other life. Although I work from home always, so it's okay. Sometimes there's not that much distinction, anyways. Other than when I have the door closed. If I don't have the door closed, everyone thinks that I'm just free as could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But awesome. So well, cool. And sure enough, like I said, I was looking. You've worked for some really interesting companies, right? Mm-hmm. Lot of schools, right? So NYU and Teachers College, which all really great schools have been working for. At first, I thought it was cool that you worked for Girl Scouts of America, because my daughter's a Girl Scout, so I have a very special place for that. But I saw something really neat. So you are a Girl Scout Gold Award winner.
Yes.
So what is that? Again, I looked it up, so I know what it is now. But for everyone else, what is that?
Yeah. So Girl Scout Gold Award recipient is the highest merit that a girl can earn within Girl Scouts. So for those of you that are familiar with Boy Scouts, it's equivalent ranking as an Eagle Scout. And the Gold Award, it's a service project that you have to complete within before you age out of the scouting system, which correlates with your senior year of high school. And typically these projects can take 2 or 3 years of prep. So once you have the concept for your project, the service project that you'd want to do, you have to find badges in the badge book that correlate with supporting that project. So maybe there's a money management badge, project management badge, community activist badge, or whatnot. And there's also various rules around the service project. So for example, when it comes to money, I believe you can't fundraise directly, but through cookie money or from some sort of other charity event you may run. Mm-hmm. You could also accept donations. So for my project, what I did was there was a local high school in my community that had special needs students enrolled in the high school. I think there were maybe a group of like 10 or 15. that required additional medical assistance while they were at school. And they were graduating seniors, and the location that the school picked for the prom was not handicap accessible and didn't have the appropriate resources to support these students being at that location. And so for my Gold Award project, I essentially ran an advocacy campaign within that school, talking about, inclusivity and, how to make everyone feel included, and just raising awareness to different levels of abilities, and then essentially provided them their own prom in a handicapped accessible facility that had the medical resources on site. So we had everything from restaurants donating food, we had a DJ donate their services, we had a local thrift store offer up gowns and tuxedos for the students, as well as having the appropriate medical staff on site. And the most important thing was that the students were able to access the building, right? So it had a handicap ramp. And, looking back at that I did all of that at 17 is kind of crazy, but that's what Girl Scouts provides, those core leadership skills to initiate and facilitate these projects at a very young age.
Mm-hmm. No, that is really awesome to hear. I mean, that's and it looked like, and again, admittedly, I had not. Now, my daughter was only in Girl Scouts for about 8 years. But so she didn't do it in high school. She started with the Daisies, and then moved through grade school. So the Gold Award, I guess it looks like it's rarer in the Girl Scouts to get a Gold Award than it is the Eagle Scouts.
Yes, my personal opinion is that the Gold Award is way more difficult than the Eagle Scout Award, but I'll just keep that opinion to myself. But yeah, if you look at some of the projects of what an Eagle Scout Award is versus a Gold Award recipient, they're two different organizations. They're two different sets of requirements. Yeah, there's no relation at all.
Mm-hmm. No, so because like when I went to the Girl Scouts page, there was they were showing the recipients from last year, and there were only 6 or 8 of them.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot.
And well, I don't know how many Eagle Scouts there are every year, but not Eagle Scouts, but whatchamacallit? Yeah, Eagle Scouts. I know there's more than 8 or 9 a year. Because I've met several of them, no, that's cool. And but obviously, since you went back to work for Girl Scouts, obviously that's been really important to you, and you still believe in the importance of the Girl Scouts.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool, because I notice, now granted, Girl Scouts is definitely different than Boy Scouts, but it does seem like nowadays, sometimes the more traditional organizations are kind of being, not looked upon as favorably. Although, again, I would say the Girl Scouts has been a little bit more ahead. I know when I was introduced to the Girl Scouts, as my daughter was in kindergarten getting ready to start, it was definitely all about, being a feminine and women power, which is why I was so happy she was doing it.
Yeah.
But no, it's cool. Yeah, it's really cool. And now I gotta say, I've met several Eagle Scouts. You're the first time I've met or at least I knew a Gold Award. So that's pretty cool. And then, but I'm curious. I guess because it's not as well known, I guess there's not as much distinction as like an Eagle Scout.
Well, I believe that if I, or someone that has their Gold Award, if they were entered the U.S. military, they would actually enter a rank higher.
I did see that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so the military does recognize it, yeah.
Yeah, I did. I noticed that. That's sure enough. For anyone who's been in the military, that's a big deal, right? To get, it's not just the money, which, trust me, those lower ranks, the higher rank does make a big difference in the money, but just being able to come out quicker definitely helps your career move quicker in the military. So no, that's cool. So then, and the other thing, The other thing I noticed about you, so you definitely have been attracted to the Louisville art scene. Because I noticed you're doing the sketchy stuff.
Yes, yeah.
So, and so sure enough, folks who don't know Louisville, I mean, Louisville actually has a very impressive art scene. It's actually really, and I tell people, it is kind of like what you would think when you see like a New York. I mean, obviously we don't have all the theaters like a New York does. So maybe not in New York, but like in LA or that type of thing, you know, I mean, we can pretty much compete against most of the major cities. Again,
Absolutely.
New York is a little bit hard to compete against because, you know, there's 24 Broadway theaters, right? So it's a little bit hard to compete against that. But so, I mean, tell me a little, I mean, so what does Sketchy Stuff do?
Yeah, so we are a sketch comedy group. We perform every other month at Kaiju. We're on hiatus right now, obviously, with all this COVID stuff going on. But we write and perform our own sketch comedy, so very similar to an SNL style. And our tagline is that we're not for babies or grandmas because we tend to use some strong language or a little bit risque. And we perform in the back of a bar, so all those things put together, you know, it's a fun time.
Oh, cool. Have you met Dave Madley?
We've met virtually.
Okay.
And we're Facebook friends, but I don't know if we've actually met in real life.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I bring that because Dave is another local developer who's also he's really big into the improv scene.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I wasn't sure if maybe if your all's paths have run into each other. Well, Dave is one of those guys who you see at like every tech event. I mean, no matter what tech it is, he just seems to. I seem to always see him. I mean, I'm known to be in a lot of things because I run a lot of things, but Dave's it even more than I am, which is almost insane to me sometimes. But so let's talk about your career. I mean, how did you get started in your career?
Oh man, how did I get started in my career? This is a really great answer. So I had my first opportunity to do anything in UX based on an internship that I had in graduate school. But the way that I got to graduate school to have that opportunity is because of a volunteer gig that I did actually through the Girl Scouts, but on the international scale. So Girl Scouts is one of, I think, 149 other countries that offer this sort of program for girls and young women. And there are these global centers. There's 5 of them kind of scattered around the world that serve as like part hostel, part event community space to run these global programs for the girls of the different member organizations to come to. And I had an opportunity to live in London for about 6 months to participate at one of these centers as an event assistant. And my job was part curriculum designer / teacher, and then part tour guide. And what was interesting in that role for me was that I was always interested in education and learning and experiential learning and informal methods of education because I didn't want to be a school teacher. I had ruled that out previously, but I didn't really know where those people worked and if those people had careers. And so I saw this opportunity and I thought, oh, let me try, I'll fill out the application. I filled out the application like a day before the deadline, was not expecting to get it at all. And then I got, I had a phone interview and then I received an email and they're like, hey, we want to offer you this opportunity. Can you come to London? Can you be here in 2 weeks? And I was like, and then and this is that same job that I mentioned earlier where they made fun of my accent. So I had no problem leaving that job.
Right.
And I was like 22 at the time. And it was right as the economy started to tank in 2008. So I had some people telling me that I was silly for leaving, that I was leaving a good job and I was going to come home to like a complete shit show and all this stuff. But I decided to go anyway. And it was through that experience that I was like designing experiences and leading experiences and getting feedback in real time. And so I came home like all jazzed up, and I was like, what was this that I just experienced, and can this be a job? And it took about, I would say, 2 years of just exploring and trial and error before I found the right pathway for me, which was a graduate school program at Columbia University that offered a degree in, I think the technical name was like instructional technology and media, but it's really just about the design of learning experiences from a cognitive perspective as well as from a digital or a technology perspective. And so I enrolled in that program, and then I had my my internship to help me pay for school, and I worked at the school in the office of web development, so the office that made websites for the different programs and for the college itself, and that's where I had my very first user experience job. And I think at the time there weren't any user experience. There definitely weren't any boot camps, because boot camps itself is only like a 5 or 6 year old concept, right? Like General Assembly and all that jazz. But I think the only degree programs at that time were like human computer interactive programs that you might see out at Stanford, or I think Michigan might have had one. But that was kind of it, right? So I kind of used my current degree program, which was in instructional design, and supplemented that with a bunch of books and articles and learning about Nielsen and all that stuff. And that's kind of how it all started.
No, that's cool. It's cool. So, I mean, I've noticed you've been you've done a lot of teaching. You've done a lot of, I mean, in some form or fashion, you've done a lot of, actually doing, building the UIs and so. I mean, what side do you think you prefer more?
Oh man, my favorite part is probably working with whoever the customer or the client is, and just being able to distill and tease out of them, what's the core problem? What are you looking to do? What would be an ideal future state? And then putting some sort of concept together and then bringing it back to them and going through that review and analysis process again.
Cool. So, what about challenges? I mean, what type of challenges do you face?
Oh man, I think that communication is always a challenge, both in understanding what someone's problem or issue may be, as well as the job of then articulating that back out to the next person, who would have to pick up that task, like working with my development team, taking those requirements and then it's all about, like, at each milestone, you kind of have to do a translation, right? So the client meets with me, that we have a conversation, I have to translate what their problem is so that it makes sense to me. Then I internalize that. I would create some sort of mock-up around that, and then I have to go and communicate that or translate that to another group of people, till eventually it comes full circle, right? When you have your finished product, and then you go back to the customer and they're like, hey, like your problem, like the conversation that we had inspired this. Does this meet your needs? And again, it's another point of translation.
Oh, yeah, I think that's it's a general problem, in IT, is the communication. Yeah. Of course, a lot of it is because a lot of developers are not very communicators to begin with. Most developers are very introverted and kind of want to stay in their own bubble, which is actually, every time I think about that, I think about Office Space when, with the guy trying to explain what he does. And they're trying to say, so you just deliver, you take the requirements and you deliver. I was like, yeah, but you don't understand. I actually feel for that guy a lot, because I understood exactly what that guy was doing. But awesome. So what do you like to do outside of work?
So outside of work, so sketchy stuff.
Sketchy, yeah.
I would say that's probably my primary hobby outside of work. I also like to perform in community theater. But I'm fine. I'm learning about myself that a lot of my hobbies exist outside my house. And I'm also learning that the personality test I took in college that told me I was an introvert is probably wrong, or I changed, because I think a lot of my stuff, things that revive me, probably come from outside the home.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's been an interesting learning moment, I would say, for myself.
Well, so it's funny, you talk about maybe you're not an introvert. I find that number one, there's definitely different types of introverts. Myself, I'm definitely an introvert. Yeah, here I am on Twitch every day, broadcast, talking about myself all day long, not all day, but at least a couple hours a day. I go speak at conferences. But I can tell you, like when I'm done when I turn Twitch off, or when I'm done at a conference, I go off in a little corner, and I'm by myself. So the point of, I love talking with people. At the same time, I know myself. I need my time when I am by myself, right? Whereas, like, my daughter is the complete opposite, right? She wants to be with people all the time, right? And she can't she gets jittery if she's at the house by herself, not talking to anyone all day, which is why the pandemic has really affected her. So she was in school. She's in grad school up in Boston. But obviously came home because it wasn't safe for her to stay up there, and so she's been pretty jittery for the last couple months, because there's nowhere to go, and all her classmates are all over the country right now, back to their homes. But so long story short, I think there is a difference between I think there are different types of introverts. Is, I guess, what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, with that, so do you fall in that normal trap that most tech folks do, and that you work too much, or do you find that you're able to cut yourself off from work?
Oh man, I think it depends on what I'm working on. If I feel like I'm in a good flow and I'm making good progress, and it's time for me to sign off from work, I'll probably stay on. But if something's really frustrating me and I'm hitting walls, I actually do like to have a lot of breathing room in between, because oftentimes my ideas for that solution will come from when I'm not working. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm at the gym, or if I'm washing the dishes, or even just like sitting on the couch and like passively watching television and thinking about it. If I stress myself out too much, those answers won't come to me. But if I just move on to another activity, then I have enough faith in myself at this point that I know I could figure out a problem that seems kind of wonky, but I just need to allow myself the time and the space. Yeah. No,
and that's actually a really good point of advice. I mean, when you're stuck in something, step away from it.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, as someone who manages developers, that's one of the biggest problems I see. Is they just get stuck in an idea, and I gotta admit, I do the same thing. You get stuck in that idea, and then you keep on getting stuck on it, right? And taking that break and getting away can really help a lot.
Yeah.
While you didn't mean it as advice, it's actually really good advice. But great. Let's talk about your presentation you're going to be doing at Code PaLOUsa. So the title is Golden Nuggets and Secret Sauce: Makings of Delightful User Experience, which it's got a really great write-up talking about the chicken and the egg, and it doesn't really matter what come first and that stuff. So what are attendees going to get out of that talk?
Yeah. So my hope is that by the end of our talk together, that people would realize that in order for your customers or your clients to have that delightful meal, you need both the golden chicken nuggets and the bomb ass secret sauce, right? For them to feel satisfied. And that's really an analogy towards you need both UX and UI together in order to support that holistic user experience. I think a lot of times UX is overlooked because a lot of the work that we do as practitioners is never really seen. It morphs and evolves over time, and you may see a very small remnants of that in the final product. But in order to get to that place, it takes a lot of research and analysis and ideation that goes, unfortunately, unseen. So I think a lot of companies or people just may experience this, that they're not given the time or the space for that exploration up front, that people just want to see, show me the wireframe, show me the thing, tell me what it's going to look like. But if you want to have a really great experience or a great meal, you kind of need to go through the whole process.
So, I guess a good question that is, what really is the difference between UI and UX?
Yeah. So user experience deals with understanding a user's preferences in addition to their behaviors and the problems that they're trying to solve. So for example, UX really doesn't care about the latest, bootstrap UI components or the hottest mobile app trends, right? They're interested in the utility of a product, how people move through it, where they get stuck, where their frustration is. And UX is kind of that sleek wrapper that you would put around that product or that experience once it gets defined.
Awesome. So, it sounds like this session isn't meant just for design folks, but really for anyone in the development cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is great. It's, I know personally, I really enjoy those kind of talks because, trying to make myself a better developer, learning the different aspects. It's, as I always joke, you don't want me actually building the UI. But at least I understand what needs to be there. I just don't have the creativity to do it correctly. But so sure enough, what would be your advice to someone like myself, right? Like I say, I know UI needs to be good. I know why it needs to be good. But what should I be looking for to make where I don't have that creative juice to make something? What should I be looking for to improve my product? So.
I think if you're looking to improve your product, you should probably have a good understanding about where the issues or the gaps are. So some sort of feedback metric from your customers, right? Whether it is feedback that comes in through support tickets, or if you do some sort of annual or quarterly survey with your customers, right? But understanding what your customers' needs are, that should really drive the development and filling those product gaps. I think to your point about making it look good, there's also, does it feel good? And that's kind of where UX comes into play. Again, like behaviors and feelings. There's a really interesting framework. There's an information architect out there called Abby, the IA. IA stands for Information Architecture. And she has, I think there are 10 heuristics where you could do some sort of gap analysis of your product. And there are things like how delightful is it? How findable is it? How searchable is it? And they're different rankings that you could use to define the level of interaction between the person and the product and how it makes them feel. And to me, that's, again, kind of at the core of UX. If someone can get through a product or a goal, a task on a product, and feel okay about it, and then I've done my job, right? I'm not looking for people to say, that was an amazing experience and I loved the placement of that button. That made me feel so good. Like, you're never going to hear all of the good stuff. You're only going to hear when there's problems. So for me, if I don't hear any feedback from a client, then I know that I've done a pretty decent job.
Mm-hmm. It almost sounds like almost like a thankless job, right? I mean, it's you've done it right when you don't hear anything, right?
Yeah. Kind of, yeah.
So awesome. So for anyone who's just getting started, right, and wants to be more into the design side, what's some advice you can give to those kind of folks?
Yeah, I would say if you're interested in becoming a UX anything, there's an entire spectrum out there. There is user experience research, there is user experience design, there's interaction design, there's UI development. And as you look across that spectrum, each one of those specialties have, skills that support the execution of those specialties. So just kind of look at your own background. Like for me, for example, I am not a developer at all. I try to code and then I curse a lot at the computer and it's not pleasant. And I've tried many times. Like when I was in graduate school, we were required to take Flash. So I took 2 semesters of Flash. Well,
that was useful, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now the Flash is just dead.
I know. But back in 2009, it was going to be the best thing. Yeah. But my background was, so my bachelor's is in psychology. My master's is in instructional design, which has a lot of psychology and learning in it. So if that's where you're coming from, like sociology, psychology, teaching, customer service, QA, there's definitely a spot for you within the whole UX ecosystem. Again, it's not all about coding and making the thing. There's a lot of work and prep and analysis that goes into the final product that all sorts of different people can participate in.
Awesome. That's sounds like great advice there. Yeah, it's and again, I mean, to summarize it, it's the don't focus on one thing of UI UX. Look at all the different options and find what's going to make more sense for you. That's kind of how I summarize what you said there. And admittedly, I would not have thought about that until I just heard it. So it's I really appreciate hearing that from you. Awesome. So, I mean, with that, do you have any closing thoughts you want to pass along?
Any closing thoughts? Yeah, I would say that if you are just getting started out, regardless if you are in school and your degree is going to say user experience on it, or if you're looking to change careers and you don't have that, don't let that deter you. Apply to every opportunity. I think I read a study once that women are much less likely than men to apply for opportunities because they feel like they don't meet the requirements. Mm-hmm. Those requirements that you see on a job description are for the unicorn or the most optimal candidate that someone is looking for. But in reality, it's all relative to the pool, right? And you don't know who's in that pool with you. So just submit for anything and everything that you may want to try out.
And that's actually really, really good advice. I mean, especially for the women in technology, because I mean that's it's one of the problems. As someone who hires folks, it's one of the problems I deal with is trying to make sure my job descriptions do not weed people out because they just think they're not qualified for it when they probably are overqualified for it sometimes.
Yeah.
So, well, awesome. It has been great having you, talking to you for the last 50 minutes or so. This has been a blast. Obviously, for anyone watching, especially, so this will go up on YouTube. So anyone watching YouTube, you'll be able to see Francesca and a lot of other great speakers at Code PaLOUsa. So I hope you attend that. And again, Francesca, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, Chad.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.